The Trumpet Daily is presented by Stephen Flurry. The program analyzes world news and history from a distinct perspective and compares current events to prophecies found in the Bible. The program also offers free educational publications, including the Trumpet News Magazine and books and booklets. The Trumpet Daily is produced at the Philadelphia Church of God's home campus in Edmond, Oklahoma, and its sister campus in Edstone, England. More information is available at thetrumpet.com.
The Trumpet Daily program begins right now.
Today's world news, what it means, where it's taking us.
I bring you the one and only possible message of world peace.
This is a message of hope, tremendous hope. And he said unto me, you must prophesy again.
The Trumpet Daily program begins right now.
We're at the end of an epic week for President Trump. It all started with U.S. strikes that obliterated Iran's nuclear program, followed by a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. Rwanda and the Congo just signed a peace deal at the White House today. NATO members committed to double their contributions. Oil and gas prices are down. The stock market just hit a record high. And to top it all off, today, a massive series of wins for President Trump at the U.S. Supreme Court. First, in a 6-3 vote, the Supreme Court rebuked the partisan activist judges who tried to impede Trump's agenda with dozens of nationwide injunctions. Those nationwide injunctions are now over, and the despotic behavior from America's far-left lower court judges has been held in check. Watch this.
Taking power away from these absolutely crazy radical left judges is a tremendous, this is such a big day. This is such a big day, but this is a very big moment, and it gives power back to people that should have it, including Congress, including the presidency. And it only takes bad power away from judges.
Mr. President, you were just coming off of one of the most consequential weeks anybody has ever seen, from striking Iran to going to NATO, to announcing 2 deals, and then this Supreme Court victory. Have you been able to digest what has occurred in the last 7 days?
Not really. It was a pretty wild period of time. And I really think in 6 months, we've taken the country and turned it around.
A wild period of time, that is for sure. We have all of that and a lot more to get to on today's show. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily. We appreciate you joining us today, broadcasting to you from our beautiful studio in Edstone, our beautiful campus. You can see the building behind me, a little fuzzy, but that's where we've been the last few days, and a lot is going on as per usual. Every Monday, it seems, we have twice as much material to get to. But you heard the commentators. It's an epic week for the President of the United States. He's getting one victory after another. That's the way that they see it. But then you look into the long-term impact, let's say, of the big, beautiful bill, or trying to reach a peace deal with the King of the South, Iran. We'll update you on all of those stories. I know we spent a lot of time on Iran for obvious reasons just last week, but there's more that's rolling out. But to go back to the victory in court, the Supreme Court, that is. I mean, we're seeing Amos 7 play out. Basically, it's being fulfilled, and it's happening incrementally. It's not all at once, but for those that were skeptics when they heard my father or read his articles in the Trumpet about the kingdom's court, now you see what's happening. I mean, the 6-3, the ruling on Friday, smacking down something like 700 federal judges, all these activist rogue judges that were trying to slow down the progress the forward momentum of this administration. And the ruling on Friday, it's just going to give Jeroboam more king-like powers. And as we're seeing, I mean, he's using them. It's not all for good, but he's definitely using them. And his agenda goes forward. Later on in the show, too, we're gonna have more feedback from the performance, the Celtic Throne performance in Leeds last night. And you've been enjoying that, I know, for the last several weeks. And when they were in Israel, the troupe, you'll recall that I just emphasized continually the contrast between what was happening in the world. I mean, the war broke out while our performers were in Jerusalem. And as I said, what a stark contrast when you look at, these ballistic missiles flying into Israel, and then you have this wonderful, hopeful, beautiful message playing out on stage in Tel Aviv, in Haifa. And the same thing is happening here. I mean, last night we didn't have the whole stadium full, sadly. I wish that it was. But they performed in a big stadium, basically, where you would have music festivals and the like. And then you have news breaking over the weekend from this Glastonbury music festival, where the performer, if you can call him that, he's up there chanting Free Palestine, and then he adds to that, kill the IDF, kill Israel, kill the Jews. And it's on BBC. It's on state-run television. That's what it amounts to. He's chanting, and tens of thousands of people go to this music festival. I think it's one of the most popular music festivals every year. And he's chanting, kill the IDF. I'll play you the clip later. But it's just shocking. What has happened to Britain? Here, that music festival's going on the same time that we're performing in Leeds, in a stadium, in a large or at least a large theater. Not nearly enough people were there, though. I think it was like 500-600. And the ones that go always love it. But what a contrast. And then you look at the history of Glastonbury. We write about some of that in the new the history of God's true church. I've got another quote from the New Throne of David for later on. But this music festival started back in 1970, and if you're familiar with Herbert Armstrong's writings, what he wrote in The Missing Dimension in Sex, what he said about some of the festivals in the United States, Woodstock and so on, back at that time. This started in 1970. Some guy's farm trying to make money, off of his land. And it just turned into, as you would expect, coming into the new morality, this hippie festival. It says here in the True History of God's True Church book, early Greek historians agree that Peter spent that's the Apostle Peter. He spent a substantial amount of time in Britain. These historians also record that other notable men who brought the gospel to Britain included the Apostle Paul. I mean, Jesus Christ may have had history in and around that area. It says here, one church building of special note exists in the small English town of Glastonbury. 17th century English antiquary Sir Henry Spelman wrote, "It is certain that Britain received the faith in the first age from the first sowers of the world." I mean, this is where God's church started in the UK, Glastonbury, I mean. And now you've got this festival playing out. How shameful. I mean, all of this incredible history, the incredible history of God's true church. And you look at Britain today, and my father talks a fair bit about that in the New Throne of David booklet. We'll come to that contrast again a little bit later in the show as a lead-in to the wonderful feedback that we keep getting from these performances. Let's move ahead to clip. Speaking of these victories that Trump is now getting in court, listen to this one from Kellyanne Conway. You heard her in the cold open, clip 11.
Not only is this a huge win for President Trump and the rule of law, but it was made even sweeter with a striking rebuke of far-left Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. In the majority opinion, Justice Amy Coney Barrett stated, quote, "We will not dwell on Justice Jackson's argument, which is at odds with more than 2 centuries worth of precedent, not to mention the Constitution itself. We observe only this. Justice Jackson decries an imperial executive while embracing an imperial judiciary." Wow. Coney Barrett even mocked Ketanji Brown Jackson for her failing to analyze a statute because it involved, quote, boring legalese. Meanwhile, Ketanji Brown Jackson was also on the losing side of Mahmoud versus Taylor. In another 6-3 decision, the court ruled that parents do, in fact, have the final say on their children's education, and they can opt out of LGBTQ curriculum.
So that first part there, I mean, that amounts to just a total smackdown of the liberal justice on the court, saying, I'm not even going to dignify it by giving an answer. It's crazy. So they smack their own justices down together with these rogue federal justices. There was a huge, huge victory for President Trump on Friday. And just coming back to the big picture here for a moment, this is at Breitbart. Senate advancing the big, beautiful bill caps off a remarkable week of wins. And then it just goes through, you know, we dropped the bomb on the factories in Iran, and then it talks about the ceasefire. They see all of this as positive, you know, good developments. And then the big, beautiful bill, that's a victory for Trump as well. That's a win. And then the win in court. I mean, and that one is very significant given what we said about Amos 7. So there's no getting around the fact that this has been a wild last week and a half or so. Epic, in the words of one commentator. And Donald Trump and his administration, I mean, they are patting themselves on the back. We've turned it around in 6 months. We've gotten our country back. You think back to last week, the show where we talked about, you know, all that's happened just since the debate debacle from 12 months ago. I think we touched on that on Friday's show. Here's another clip from we'll move ahead. Let's just go ahead to the reaction from the radical left. This is from MSNBC, clip 6.
Imagine Donald Trump wants to do something illegal to you, Ali Velshi. Imagine that he wants to murder you. Imagine that he and Stephen Miller release an entire policy explaining about how they can murder Canadian journalists who are working in America because they're taking the jobs from real American journalists, right? So he's going to murder you. So Donald Trump starts murdering people. That is the upshot of yesterday's decision. Donald Trump has declared that he is going to do an unconstitutional thing. And various people have been able to secure the court's order that he cannot do the unconstitutional thing to them.
It's crazy that this passes for commentary. All of these scenarios. Remember that when Trump was making his way back last year? Miraculously. A lot of miracles played into that. A lot of fulfilled prophecy. And all these people going through what-if scenarios. Well, if he gets back, if he wins, that's the death of democracy. It's over. And then you listen to them there. Imagine if Donald Trump said, kill Canadian journalists. What in the world? What is wrong with these people? This was also exposed over the weekend. Kagan, she's on the court. This is something that she said back just 3 years ago. And then it shows how much of a judicial activist these people are. They're just political hacks. They're activists that happen to be wearing judge's clothing or a judge's robe. Listen to clip 3.
That can't be right. That one district court, whether it's in the Trump years, people used to go to the Northern District of California. And in the Biden years, they go to Texas. And it just can't be right that one district judge can stop a nationwide policy in its tracks and leave it stopped for the years that it takes to go through normal process.
So 3 years ago, she's like, it can't be right for a federal judge to be able to stop Trump or Biden or whoever. And of course, now she sides with the liberal minority, the ultra-liberal minority. Now you see, we need those activist judges out there stopping the Trump administration. This is from Red State. It says, in a 6-3 decision authored by Amy Coney Barrett, the court granted the government's applications to partially stay the district court's nationwide injunctions in the birthright citizenship cases, noting that universal injunctions likely exceed the equitable authority that Congress has granted to federal courts. So this puts an end to a lot of it. A lot of the judicial activism that's been slowing down. And again, we're just, as you heard in the cold open, we're only 6 months into the Trump administration. And it certainly is epic in the sense that it's happening in such a fast and furious manner. This is one thing after another. There were people that said a lot of the reason why he had to have that ceasefire in place last Tuesday is because then he's got to move on to the next thing, the big, beautiful bill. Yeah, we end war today. Tomorrow we pass this monstrosity and we add $2.2 trillion to the national debt every single year. And then we're on to the next thing. We get the victory in court. God he is fulfilling his will. God's purpose does stand. But all of this shows, though, still just how divided, how bitterly divided America is, whether you look at it politically or in courtrooms, wherever it is. You just see all kinds of division and strife. Would Donald Trump be in office right now were it not for God intervening the way that he did all through last year? We just passed the debate debacle anniversary, and we're coming up to the anniversary of the assassination attempt, where an assassin shot Donald Trump's ear, and miraculously his head turned at the precise moment that it needed to for his life to continue, his physical life. That happened less than a year ago. As I say, we're coming up on the anniversary. But now coming back to this SCOTUS ruling, listen to Jonathan Turley over at Fox News, clip 8.
And I think that the first thing the president should do is go buy a lottery ticket because he's having a heck of a week. If I was going to get a lottery ticket, it'd probably be today. But this is a huge win for him. It does negate what has been a stumbling block. These judges have been throwing sand in the works in many of his policies, from immigration to birthright citizenship to DOJ cuts. That will presumably now be tamped down if these judges try to circumvent that. I think they'll find an even more expedited path to a Supreme Court that's going to continue to reverse some of these, lift some of these injunctions. As you noted, the opinion was really radioactive in this takedown of Justice Jackson. It's rare. I've been covering the Supreme Court for decades. It's rare to see that type of exchange. The important thing to remember is that, Justice Barrett delivered what was essentially a pile driver, but she didn't do it alone. I mean, her colleagues signed on to this. And I think it's very clear that the majority is getting tired of the histrionics and the hysteria that seems to be growing a bit on the left side of the court. But this was really an astonishing takedown by the justice. But it's the hyperbole that's coming out of the dissent that is so notable. Justice Sotomayor, in that Maryland case, said that giving parents the ability to opt out of a few lessons was going to, quote, create chaos and probably end public education. Then you had Justice Jackson saying this could very well essentially be the death of democracy. It's the type of hyperbole that most justices have avoided.
He's referencing there a few other cases that were ruled on, again, favorable to the Trump agenda. One, that states can protect children from online pornography. Hard to believe anyone would fight against that, but leave it to the liberal justices on the Supreme Court. There is a conservative majority. And as my father has said, it's not like Jeroboam owns the court. It's not like he appoints them. Well, yeah, I guess he appointed 3 of them. But it says that the court favors Jeroboam, and that's what we're seeing. You know, imagine being so skeptical and so questioning that as soon as you read it in the Trumpet and maybe there's not one ruling that goes the way of President Trump, you just throw your arms in the air and say, well, I guess that was a false prophecy. No, look, Friday was huge. This was a huge victory for the Trump administration. I think Turley talked there about parents having the right to opt out their kids from LGBTQ training or teaching, any classroom activities that support that kind of Sodom and Gomorrah behavior, giving some rights or some authority back to the parents. That's refreshing. That's not something we've seen very much of in recent years. Listen again to Jonathan Turley from the other day, clip 9.
I want to begin by sharing a graphic. A lot of people are going to wonder about this reasoning behind this debate. And frankly, it all has to do with nationwide injunctions. I mean, if you just think about 3 per term under the Bush years, Obama, not that many. But look at what they've been attempting to do. This is lawfare on full display.
Well, that's why this is such an enormous victory for the Trump administration. Basically, the president's had to drag about 700 district court judges down this road, and it has slowed the progress of the policies that he wants to pursue. Now, you can disagree with those policies, but he was elected to carry out those policies. And what he said yesterday is true, that he's not the first president who's objected to this. Democratic presidents have objected to national injunctions as well. And the problem is that when these individual judges freeze an entire program or policy for the nation, it can take 2 years before you get that lifted or reversed. By then, you're in the second half of your term, and it's very hard to achieve many results.
It used to be that both sides of the aisle would agree with this. You know, none of those federal judges were voted in a presidential election. And here you have Donald Trump. How many voted for him? I forget, 90 million or something? And he comes in because the American people spoke and they want a new direction. Coming back to this prophecy, Amos 7 and verse 13, it calls it the king's, it's speaking of Jeroboam, and it says the king's court. And he says the word kings is different, a different Hebrew word than when he talked about the king's chapel. It means kingdom. The King James reads, the house of the kingdom. Wycliffe translates it, house of the realm. It says this is not a religious entity. It is something else, the nation's house. It's not something that is following Jeroboam, yet it favors him. This is back in 2019. I mean, that's 6 years ago, and my father's basically saying, look, this is what's going to happen, because the Bible says so. You know, men, it's like Joel Hilliker said in the latest Trumpet magazine. I'll come to that a little bit later. But he says men may not say so, but prophets do or did. God does. And of course, that's why you come to this program, or that's why you visit thetrumpet.com, because you want God's perspective. And look at these prophecies that are being fulfilled in such detail, the way God described it. It's incredible. It's faith-building. It's inspiring. He says, I believe this non-religious entity, the kingdom's house, is referring to the United States Supreme Court. That was back in 2019. Amos 7 implies that there's a conservative advantage in the Supreme Court, one that favors Jeroboam. You see, it favors him. And that's what we're seeing. He's getting some favor. And like I said, it's maybe trickled out of that institution, but it's now there. You know, it's something where you thought, surely this will happen in February or March. This is crazy. To have some judge in Hawaii or in California, in San Francisco, basically tell the country, no, you can't deport these illegals. Well, yes, he can. So says the kingdom's court. When we come back, we've got much more to get to regarding the big, beautiful bill, or the, as I've called it, the big, beautiful load of debt. That's what we're adding to the American economy, to the swamp, to the deep state, whatever you want to call DC. I mean, if there's one thing that both sides, never mind what Democrats are saying now, hypocritically, but what both sides of the aisle have always been able to agree upon is especially since COVID, let's spend $2 trillion more than we actually take in. We'll get to that. We'll get to the update on Iran. And as I say, we've also got some feedback from the Celtic Throne performance last night in Leeds. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily. We'll be right back.
Prosperity, government, trade, technology, stability, freedom. The last 2 centuries have been the exception in human history. How did we get here? The 19th century was dominated by an empire that exported civility, order, standards, and opened the doors for global trade. It ended slavery and implemented a system of governance that protected people's rights. And then in the 20th century, a new power came to dominate. Remarkably, one that would continue in the same traditions as its predecessor. For 200 years, the United States and Britain dominated the world stage. How did these two nations rise to prominence so suddenly? And why are their legacies so relentlessly attacked today? The astonishing truth is that your Bible prophesied the rise of Britain and the United States. It also prophesied their fall. The biblical identity of these two nations is the vital key that unlocks Bible prophecy. This lost master key to prophecy is revealed in Herbert W. Armstrong's most requested book, The United States and Britain in Prophecy. You must understand the biblical identities of these two nations to comprehend where we are in Bible prophecy today. To learn more about this vital truth, request your free copy of The United States and Britain in Prophecy.
The bottom line is this is a budget reconciliation process pretty well devoid of actually talking about numbers. About the only number we heard out of the House was 1.5 trillion, which sounds like a lot until you put it in context of the CBO's 10-year projection of $89 trillion being spent, $22 trillion of projected deficit over the next 10 years. That's a $2.2 trillion deficit per year, completely unsustainable, not even coming close to returning to a reasonable pre-pandemic level of spending. So again, we're just not taking the time to actually debate this.
Not even taking the time to debate it. That's Senator Ron Johnson, one of the few fiscally conservative senators who's saying, can't we even debate it? Can't we do something that Doge recommended? Doge is long gone. So is Elon Musk. Elon Musk he's still criticizing this big bloated bill, anything but beautiful. It says here, Elon Musk ripped into the Senate's massive domestic policy package on Saturday, calling it utterly insane and destructive, pointing to provisions in the bill that will raise taxes on many solar, battery, geothermal, wind, and nuclear energy sites. Of course, he said earlier this year that it was a disgusting abomination and that the bill should be killed. But there's Ron Johnson saying we're adding $22 trillion in debt over the next 10 years. I mean, the debt stands at $37 trillion at the moment. So we're going to add $22 trillion more, and that's assuming that the next guy after Donald Trump, assuming time went on that long, would actually spend the same amount. He may spend more. That's what they do. Ever since COVID. You see, COVID was a crisis. So we've got to spend $2 trillion extra. And that's what we've been doing every year since. We haven't dialed it back at all. Not one penny. So much for Doge, as I say. Here was another critic of the big bloated load of debt added to the federal deficit. This is Senator Tom Tillis, clip 2.
Now, Republicans are about to make a mistake on health care and betraying a promise. It is inescapable that this bill in its current form will betray the very promise that Donald J. Trump made in the Oval Office or in the cabinet room when I was there with finance, where he said we can go after waste, fraud, and abuse on any programs.
Never happened. I mean, Trump's most loyal supporters, they're not going to like hearing it. But, and in a lot of ways, they're not bothered by it. I mean, we've been spending way beyond our means for decades. So everyone's under this delusional reasoning that it can just go on forever. Yeah, we can go from 37 to 57 trillion, 59 trillion actually, in just 10 years, 1 decade. This is where we are. It really and truly is shocking to see the childish reasoning of so many of these leaders in America. You look over here in the UK, you see the leadership with Starmer. You see the BBC giving a platform to all of this propaganda. You see how the international news outlets report on the Israel-Palestinian situation. You see CNN journalists working their way into Tehran or cozying up to the new leadership in Syria. And of course, the jihadists in suits, they love them. They love our propagandists because they help deliver their message. Iran, I mean, for its part, you look at, again, I told you last week about just how ultra sensitive the Trump administration is. If you dare say anything other than those nuke facilities were obliterated, if you don't say that, then, I mean, you're singled out. You're a traitor. And yet you look at all these conflicting reports. You look at a lot of reporting coming out of the UK here at the Telegraph. You look at some of the leaks. We talked about this last week on the show. Listen to this. This is European coverage of the ongoing controversy on whether or not the nuke facilities were obliterated. This is clip 12.
The head of the International Atomic Energy Agency says Iran could resume enriching uranium within months after the latest Israeli and U.S. attacks on its nuclear facilities. Rafael Grossi's statement contradicted President Donald Trump's claims that last week's bombing raids had, quote, obliterated Iran's nuclear program. The Iranian parliament has suspended its cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency following the strikes.
Iran's deputy foreign minister has told our correspondent in Tehran that his country won't start talks on its nuclear program unless the US guarantees not to bomb them again during the negotiations. It comes as the head of the UN's nuclear watchdog, the IAEA, warns that Iran retains the capacity to resume enriching uranium in a matter of months and could still produce a nuclear bomb.
We are hearing from Washington telling us that they want to talk. By the way, no date has been set.
President Trump talked about this week.
I'm telling you that we have not agreed to any date. We have not agreed to the modality. Right now, we are seeking an answer to this question. Are we going to see a repetition of an act of aggression while we are engaging in dialogue?
Satellite imagery shows Iran's nuclear sites were badly damaged. But Iran still says it won't stop enriching uranium.
Why should we agree to such a proposal?
Because Iranians on this visit have told us that Iran has paid too high a price for enriching uranium, causing suspicions even among your European partners.